The no-thinking lifestyle, the reliability of the mind. Now, some things in life seem simple to us, while other things look complex. For example, if I were to ask you what 1 plus 1 equals, you would say 2. If I ask you what direction Tom would go if he stepped off this cliff, what would you say? Down. When something is simple, it means we understand it. We can predict the outcome, and it is easy for us. On the other hand, what if I ask you what the solution to this equation was? Or what if I ask you to tell me what job Tom would pick? It would not seem so simple, but complex. When something is complex, it means we lack information, we don't know the outcome, and it is difficult for us. When something is simple, we call it a no-brainer, because we know the answer and we understand it without having to think and make a decision. When something is complex, we often are forced to think and make more decisions, since we don't know the outcome. The harder and longer we have to think and make decisions, we will notice that the results are not always the best. It takes us more time and more work to get something done. Stress and worry begin to increase, and we feel the fear of uncertainty and possibility of mistakes. Now in this lesson, we'll examine our brain's capability to think and make decisions. To do this, we'll look at what the current leading researchers have discovered about our brains. Let's begin with our perception, or our ability to see. Dr. Beau Lotto has proposed our perception is faulty. We see the world not as it is, but as it is useful to see. Our brain interprets what we see to have it make sense to us, but often this information can be misinterpreted. For example, this is a picture of a jungle scene without color. Can you see the animal in the picture? If you haven't seen it by now, you would be dinner. This is a picture with color. Take a look at this picture. What if I told you the bottom and top square pieces were the same color? When examining this cube, what if I told you these two pieces were the same color? How about this dress? Is it blue and black, or is it gold and white? These are simple examples that show how often what we think we see may not always be correct. Next is our capability to notice things. Let's read what Daniel Simons discovered. He found that our attention is limited. Although we may think we notice everything, most of us can only pay attention to one thing at a time. For instance, did you notice when the title of this slide changed? It used to say, "Are you paying attention?" Replay the video to watch it again and pay special attention to the title. Here's another quick example of this concept in a short clip.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
Sorry, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Next is our memory. How good is yours? See how many of these words you can memorize before they are taken away. Okay, now to test your memory, see how many of these words were written previously. Now, if you guessed anything above 0, you would be wrong. None of the words were written before. Now, not only do people not remember things, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus has shown that people can come up to believe things that never really happened. One of the experiments she did was interviewing people about their experience at Disneyland. After showing them pictures like this, she would then ask them if they met Bugs Bunny when they went to Disneyland. Many would say yes. When asked to remember their experience, they would give elaborate stories of touching his ears or shaking his hand, all of which would be impossible, since Bugs Bunny is not a Disneyland character, but a Warner Brothers character. Lastly, let's go over our ability to make decisions. Dr. Antonio Damasio shows how we heavily base our decisions on emotion. What we remember from previous situations is not just the facts, but we also remember what we felt. In doing this, we label situations and people as good, neutral, and bad on an emotional level without even knowing it. For instance, let's say you were to go to McDonald's and were robbed. You would label McDonald's as bad, even though it has nothing to do with McDonald's. The next day, you go to Burger King and find $20 and identify it as good, even though it has nothing to do with Burger King. Then there are many restaurants that are neutral. Now, you don't remember how the food tastes at either restaurant or anything that really differentiated them, but when given the option to go eat at a fast food restaurant, you will often choose Burger King because emotionally you are attached to it. This same concept applies to many other biases we have in our decision making. Dr. Daniel Kahneman researches choice supportive bias, which is when people tend to defend themselves because it was their choice. For instance, you may choose to buy an Android instead of an iPhone, or choose Beauty and the Beast as the best Disney movie, or the Chicago Bulls as the best basketball team. You would be more likely to focus only on the positive points and advantages of your choices and the negative disadvantages for everything else because, of course, you're always right. Dr. Talia Sharot researches optimism bias, the tendency to overestimate our likelihood to experience good events and underestimate our likelihood of experiencing bad events. For instance, in the United States, 40% of marriages fail, or 2 out of 5. Yet if you ask any newlywed couple their chance of divorce, they all will answer 0%. Or how everyone knows smoking kills, yet most people that smoke don't think it will ever happen to them. Dr. Gary Marcus researches self-serving bias, the tendency to give ourselves credit for our success and place blame on others for our failures. For instance, if you were to take a test at school and received a good grade, you would say it was because you studied hard or because you're smart. But if you failed, you would blame the teacher for making the test too hard, the fact that you were sick that day, or the chairs were just too uncomfortable and distracting. Now, after hearing all of these studies and examples, you may be thinking, what does this even mean? Well, if we were to analyze our brain's capability to think and make decisions, we have found that our perception is faulty, our attention is limited, our memory is unreliable, we put emotions before facts, and we are heavily biased in our decisions. All in all, our brain has failed in all aspects. So by looking at all the current research, our brain is not very good at thinking or making decisions. Now the big question is, if you can't trust your own brain, what can you do? In our next lesson, we'll go over how we can become successful without having to think or make decisions. As a personal activity, identify examples in your own life when you were illogical due to one of the weaknesses of the brain that we have discussed.